in the spirit of authenticity, I am apologizing for being late this morning, but I travel quite a lot for a living. And every Friday morning I have Donut Friday with my boys since they were this big. They're 11 and 9 now. And I didn't want to miss it this morning. And I lived at the beach. So I hope you can understand that given the drive, I had to go to that. But thank you for having me. And I feel like I couldn't have been teed up any better this morning, talking about leading from within and being an authentic leader and what that means and what servant leadership means, because my conversation with you today is going to be about what gets in the way of that. And it's going to be specifically about our stress, our energy, and how they interact and intersect with our ability to perform at our best and live out these things that we want to live out. So that's what we're going to talk about today. In the spirit of making it a more active endeavor, I know you just had a break, but we're going to do it anyway. I'm going to ask you some statements or tell you some statements, and I want you to stand up if they resonate with you. Are you ready? So here's the first one. I want you to stand if you believe that you're feeling stressed due to the demands in your life right now. She was prepping before I even said the first line. Now I want you to stand or remain standing if you feel like that stress is going to increase in the next year. Stand or remain standing if you feel like overall stress has a negative impact on your life. Last one. Stand or remain standing if you look like this at work from time to time. Now hang on. Stay up there for me. Keep standing if you're standing up. I want you to look around the room really quick. There's two things I want you to notice here. Number one, you're not alone. Our experience of stress, negative stress in the workplace, it's universal. And it's not going anywhere. And I don't mean to sound like a Debbie Downer, but that's the reality. It's not going to go anywhere. You are high-performing people. By virtue of the fact that you are standing in this room right now, we can agree on that. And with high-performing people, you expect and demand of yourselves and of the people around you hard work, high demand, high stress. So it's not going to go anywhere. But the second thing I actually want you to notice is that's not necessarily such a bad thing. You're connected to people you don't even know. I imagine your teams would agree. And the other part of that is that look at how far you've come. All of the things that you face on a day-to-day basis, you grind through, you charge through, and yet here you are, still standing, still thriving. Your organizations are still thriving. The key, I think, and this is what we're going to talk about today, is how you manage that stress. And it's a threefold process, really. It's understanding what stress really is. We're going to talk about that today. Changing your story about stress. And then we're going to learn how to leverage the tools that have been given to you divinely. Your body, your mind, your heart and soul, in order to leverage that stress for growth and maximize your performance at work and at home where it actually matters. Because we're servant leaders at work, but we're also servant leaders at home and in our communities. So that's what we're going to talk about. Sound good? Yeah. Now you can sit. I won't make you stand 40 minutes, I promise. My boot camp instructor days are over. That was 10 years ago. So we're going to do that first by building a little bit of awareness, and then I'm going to go into some fundamentals of well-being and performance. And the breakout session is going to move a lot of this from insight to action, and we'll do action planning around these. This assessment, before we do it, take out a sheet of paper, because you're going to do this with me right now. And on that sheet of paper, I want you to create 2 columns. Now, this assessment was originally developed by a man named Dr. Jim Lair. You may or may not have heard of him. He's the co-founder of the Human Performance Institute in Lake Nona, Florida. He's a good friend and mentor of mine. He developed this in a book called The Only Way to Win. Really, really great book. And I kind of changed it around and adapted it to meet our needs. But I want to give him credit where credit's due. It's a really fantastic assessment, and I wanted to bring it to you. So in this first column, here's what I want you to do. On a scale of 1 to 10, I want you to assess how much you value the following categories or areas in your life on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being I don't value it at all, 10 being I couldn't value it anymore. This This is non-sequential. You don't have to order these. They can all be 10s. They can all be 1s. So how much do you value your faith? How much do you value your family and your relationships? How much do you value your community? Community to me means my neighborhood, my church family, the Bunko girls, the softball team. What about your personal health and your happiness? Your happiness, not the happiness of those around you. Your rest. And then the last one says your work or your vocation. Now, when you've finished assessing those value-wise, we're going to move to the column next to it, column B. We're going to assess actuals. How much actual time and energy do you invest in those areas of your life? 1 to 10. My perfectionists and analyzers in the room, yes, I put time and energy in the same category on purpose. If it hurts your brain, put 2 numbers there. How much actual time and energy do you invest in your faith, your family, your community, your personal health? How much actual time and energy do you invest in your own happiness, your rest, and your work? Well, the last thing I want you to do when you're done assessing and filling out those numbers is take a good look at them. And I want you to circle or star off, highlight the areas of your life with the greatest discrepancy between numbers. Biggest gaps. That could go either way, right? We could value our personal health at a 10. We could invest a 2 in time and energy. We could value our work at a 6-ish, invest a 10. These are the energy suckers in your life. These are the areas that inform our stress and our experience of stress, and the ones I want you to pay attention to as I'm talking. I want you to think over these categories in your life. The promise is not to make all these 10s. It's to close the gap on the areas of greatest discrepancy. And yes, there's a big difference between time and energy invested. We kind of touched on that already. Because I can spend a lot of time at work, but I don't have to give all of my energy to it. I can give my full and best when I'm there, and I'm going to teach you a trick on how to come home with as much energy as you left with for the day. Sounds good. And it's not a product or a pill, I promise. I don't deal in those substances. But it's a really important distinction to be made, because I can go home and I can sit down for dinner with my husband and my 2 boys, and I could give my full and best for 20 minutes at dinner with no phone and no distractions and nothing weighing on my mind or my heart. I'm just there fully. Or I could sit on the couch for 3 hours, all of us, staring at screens, drained and exhausted and burned out from our day because we were at a full sprint. And we're totally disengaged and disconnected from each other. Big difference between time and energy. I can't promise you any more time, but I can certainly promise you more energy. That's limitless if you manage it effectively and you manage your stress effectively. So that's what we're going to talk about. So now we move from this kind of hopefully bit of self-awareness, and we move into some fundamentals of well-being and performance that I hope will help you move again from insight to action. These are some fundamentals that I've collected over the years through my research and my interaction with brilliant minds that were way more brilliant than my own, kind of consolidating that research and science, and I'm trying to bring it to you. A little more technical on the technical side today, a little more sciencey. So here's the first one, fundamental number 1. We draw our energy from multiple dimensions of well-being and performance. I like to call them pathways. in the interest of time, I narrowed it down to 3. Body, mind, spirit. Your body pathway, as you could probably imagine, is your physical energy. Remember, I said that we need to learn how to leverage these areas of our life to improve our performance at work and at home. When I say performance, I'm not talking about hard metrics of performance that you would traditionally think of at work. I'm talking about your ability to show up your best and embody these concepts that we're talking about of authenticity, vulnerability, leading from within. Physical energy. This is how you fuel your body with nurturing foods that are worthy of you, that increase your energy and don't take it away. This is about how you move your body and exercise your body, and those are 2 different things. Because we can exercise regularly and then sit for 8 hours a day, right? And actually, recent research is showing that it can negate that hour of exercise to sit all day in terms of long-term health benefits. Or we can move around during the day and never exercise our body. So 2 different things. And then how we rest our body. Show of hands. How many of you do, and we touched on this, get 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night? And that's about define night. Yeah, that's about the national average. 27% of Americans get enough sleep per night. And let me tell you, I've been in the research science field for a long time. I can tell you that it is almost a darn fact that you need 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. Thousands of studies validating the same thing. 1% of the global population falls outside those needs. 1%. Chances are that's not us, right? And then I get the pushback. Some of you in your head are already thinking it, oh, I get 5 hours of sleep per night. She doesn't know. I'm fine that way. I thrive. That's not thriving. It's surviving. Your body adapted to it, and the good news is you don't even know your potential if you're doing okay on that amount of sleep. So then there's our mental energy, our mind pathway. This is about how we manage this new world of 24/7, hyper-connected, always on, always judged, information all the time. Screens everywhere, to-do lists, infinity, right? It never ends. We pile on more. Work comes home with us now in our pocket. Sometimes some of us work at home, and it never leaves. How do you manage the mental clutter that is a result of today's world? Because what comes with mental clutter? Increased what? Stress. So how are you managing that? Also, how aware are you of your emotions in the moment that are a consequence of that mental clutter? As a leader, you should be keenly aware of when a negative emotion is surfacing and how to get from reaction to response and not be a reactive leader. And then there's the spirit pathway, which, as you can imagine, is our spiritual energy. Now, as a Christian, I think of this as my faith life. But generally speaking, it is about your knowledge of your unique calling, your sense of meaning and purpose in your life. How clear is that for you? Can you articulate your why? And if you can articulate your why, the second question I would ask is, are your actions and behaviors and day-to-day decisions measured against it? Are you aligned with it? What is your soul trajectory? And if it's not aligned with it, and in 5-10 years you're off course, what can we do now to course correct you? Leveraging those other pathways. Are you sleeping for it? Are you eating for it? Are you managing your stress for it? Convicting thoughts. If anything convicts you, if you feel it here, write it down. It's an area you want to pay attention to. Fundamental number 2. We are designed to oscillate between work and recovery using those pathways, those dimensions. If you took nothing away from my conversation with you today, take this one thing, okay? Don't miss this. What is this right here? Anybody know? Yeah, it's a pulse, yeah. It's a rhythm in a body, right? A cardiovascular rhythm. God put a lot of those rhythms in our body. Cardiovascular, respiration is another rhythm. Circadian rhythm is another rhythm. Digestion, ovulation, International Women's Day. I gotta keep plugging the girls today. There's another lesser-known rhythm of the body you may or may not have heard of called the ultradian rhythm. Have you heard of that? It's also known as your BRAC, your basic rest activity cycle. The BRAC is a 24-hour-a-day rhythm of the body, and it is a rhythm of cognitive peak performance and a dip in performance of the brain. No matter who you are or how well you think you're trained, for every 90 to 120 minutes, you can give your full and best to something, and no matter what, you're going to experience a dip in cognitive performance. Your brain will shut down a little bit. And that shows up differently for all of us. It loves to show up for me as back-to-back conference calls, and I start to drift off, and somebody asks me what my thoughts are on that subject. That's my BRAC showing up. It shows up as irritation, stress, burnout. You ever had to get up and walk away from the computer staring at a bunch of numbers or proposal? That's your BRAC. Now, you can either work with it or against it. Against it, it's what we tend to do. 99% of the leaders I work with will admit this to me. They give every bit of their energy to their job at a full sprint all day, and they come home with nothing left for the people who matter. Working with it is different. That's what I don't want you to miss. What if every 90 to 120 minutes you inserted a moment of recovery into your day, a little bit of renewal? I wish I could tell you to go take a 2-hour nap every 90 to 120 minutes. Not realistic, but what if it was a micro moment? And again, you're leveraging the pathways to do that. So what would that look like? A healthy snack, a glass of water, stand up and stretch, breathe, set of squats, walk around the office. How about disconnection from all devices, a prayer, go talk to a coworker?
I take the dogs out.
Take the dogs out. I do laundry. The only time that laundry is considered recovery. It's when I'm working, right?
How long?
Minute or two. Doesn't have to be a long time. And you can use any of those pathways to do it. Recovery is the key to performance and energy enhancement. And if you don't believe me, look at the hundreds of studies that have been done across the board. When you insert recovery moments into your day and oscillate, it improves every business metric. Bottom line improves. Productivity improves. Engagement, employee retention and attrition rates, all of them impacted by allowing and creating a culture where recovery is regular. Don't miss that one. Fundamental 3. Our energy and our performance are often driven by how we respond to stress. And we talked about that. And I'm going to hit it again. I'm going to take you back to 6th grade science here, okay? You see that brain? I trisected it and simplified it a little bit of brain science. This bottom part, this purple part, you see that? That's known as your reptile brain. It's known as your reptile brain because reptiles only have this part of the brain. It is strictly designed for survival, fight or flight. You ever heard of fight or flight? This is the part of the brain. Its only job, scan the world for threat, react if it needs to. And then you have that middle part of the brain, that pink and green, that's your emotional brain. This is where we experience emotion. Also, long-term memory lives there. And then you see that other part, the top part of the brain, that big honking part. That's your rational brain. I like to call that your high-performance hub. This is what makes humans humans and separates us from our animal friends. This is where we have logic, reason, rationale, critical decision-making, intellect, creativity, innovation, abstract thought. Would you agree with me that this is where you would like to be during your day? Would you be surprised to know that 94% of our day we live in the reptile brain? Some of us more than others. We are survival creatures. We were designed that way to keep us alive, continue evolving. But if you're not careful, you can live here too long. So now we're going to talk about what happens when this part of our brain experiences a threat. I'm going to use an example of someone cutting you off on I-4. It never happens, but just as an example. Someone cuts you off on I-4. You slam on your brakes, right? It's reactive. That's called the stress response. That reptile brain will activate the stress response. In that moment, it is a biological reaction you will never get rid of, and you don't want to, right? You don't want to stop and reason as to whether or not you should I slam on my brakes? Is the road wet? How's the weather? Is there a car? No. You want to instinctually slam on your brakes to survive, right? Here's what happens in that moment. The sympathetic nervous system activates. That's the first part of the stress response. 30% of our blood flow pools to the bottom of our brain during that time. Where do you think it's coming from? High performance hub. Logic, reason, rationale, critical decision making, all of it impaired in that moment. Why? To make us survive. Right. Flood of adrenaline and cortisol floods the system. Non-essential functions go by the wayside. Rational thought, digestion shuts down. Immune system shuts down. That's why chronic stressors get sick more often. They're more susceptible to chronic diseases, diabetes type 2, heart diseases, as we talked about before, some types of cancer. That's why they have IBS and ulcers, chronic upset stomach. Yeah. So those are some things that happen during the stress response. Car goes away, we survive. Whew. Parasympathetic nervous system now will activate. A hormone called acetylcholine will be secreted, designed to slow the heart rate and bring us back to homeostasis. Whew. Right? And then this stress response is over. Here's the problem. A threat is a threat is a threat. And your body cannot tell the difference between a car cutting you off on I-4 and an email in your inbox in the subject line is all caps and it says urgent. Or an unexpected bill. Or constant interruption and distraction. We're interrupted every 20 minutes during our workday on average. Stress response is a biological reaction. It will never go away, and it will continue to go. And we live in a new world where a lot of us are living in sympathetic nervous system all day. And we wonder why we have such a health crisis on our hands. This is one of the reasons. So what do you do about that if it's biological and you can't get rid of it? There's two little hacks I'll give you right now, because the best leaders I know, and the ones that this is what we primarily work on, is learning how to move from reaction to response. Close the gap on the refractory period between the two, between stress response or reaction and response. So here's two hacks. Number one, and it's going to sound stupid, take a deep breath. Take a deep breath right now. I bet you're holding your breath. You'd be surprised how many of us do. A long exhale triggers the parasympathetic nervous system and the secretion of that hormone that slows the heart rate. That's an easy hack. Number two, ask yourself a stupid question. I know that sounds silly. It actually works way better when you do it to somebody else. Start asking yourself stupid questions. What did I eat last night? What was my favorite 80s movie? What kind of socks am I wearing? What color are they? What are you doing when you do that? You're using your rational brain. You're recruiting blood back up into the new part of the brain. And let me tell you, this is a good hack for other people who you can see are experiencing a stress response. Way better to do it on someone else. Number three, this is my personal favorite. I use it all the time. Is my house on fire? And are my kids safe? Those two questions save my butt. Is my house on fire? I got a flight canceled last week. Okay, reaction, right? Can't get rid of the reaction. I was very mad, very frustrated. Is my house on fire? No. My kids safe? Yes. What am I doing during that time? I'm changing my story about stress. And it's no longer a threat to me if it's not a threat to my children, my house. Changing my story about stress. That leads to the fourth fundamental. Our beliefs drive our behaviors. Because what you believe, the story you tell yourself, this goes back to our conversation of self-awareness. The story you tell yourself is where you're going to focus your energy and your stress. For example, if I believe that a canceled flight is worthy of me getting worked up and expending all my energy in that area, I'm going to focus my energy there. I'm going to react accordingly. If I believe that exercise and nutrition and a good night's sleep aren't for me, she doesn't know me. If she knew my schedule, if she only knew. What story are you telling yourself? You're not going to focus your energy in those areas of your life. Oh, I'm just destined to be this way. No. If you believe that multitasking is the only way to get through your day and get it all done, and you ignore the science that it doesn't work, and you ignore the science that productivity decreases and stress increases, multitasking is the enemy of excellence. Did you know that? Our brain cannot focus on 2 cognitive tasks at the same time. It is not designed that way. One at a time. Excellence. Multitasking is the enemy of excellence. It decreases performance and it increases stress. If you believe that, well, yeah, but she doesn't know my schedule. What story are you telling yourself? That's where you're going to focus your energy. You see where I'm going with this? If you believe you're not worthy of success, if you believe that you're not worthy of in taking care of your body, that's where your energy is going to go. Your beliefs drive that. So the question I would have for you today is, what stories are you telling yourself about these areas of your life? Look at that assessment we did. What story do you tell? Well, I can't focus my energy when I get home on my kids. I have to work. I'm doing it for them. Story you're telling. If you change your story, it changes your life. Here's the last one. It's been a while since I used my remote. This channel will exit unless you tell me you want to keep straight. Thank you. Is my house on fire? Last one, last fundamental. We can change. If you've never heard this science before, I'm very excited. And if you've already heard it, let's do a refresher. 30, 40 years ago, we thought that our adult brain was fixed, that every belief, mindset, and habit was something that was fixed and permanent in the brain. Now we know otherwise. Every thought, every belief, every habit that you have is simply a series of neural pathways. Okay? This right here is a neuron. When you have a new thought or a new habit, they fire and wire together, these neurons, millions of them. And the more that you think that thought and the more you fire and wire them together, it creates neural pathways in the brain. Blinking is a neural pathway. Thinking positively about myself is a neural pathway. Eating healthy, going to exercise, those are neural pathways. Now we know that neuroplasticity is the process of creating a new neural pathway in the brain. Our brain is much more plastic and malleable than we thought it was. And no matter what type of change you want to make in your life, it is possible to make. And this is the great news. The new neural pathway will be stronger and more resilient than the former. Think about a nice flowing river and redirecting that water in another direction. What's going to happen to that old river? It's going to dry up, and the new river will be flowing. Now, it's not going to be easy. Whoever tells you that creating a new habit in your life is easy is absolutely lying to you. Have you ever watched a child learn how to tie their shoes? Have you ever seen the energy expended on their little faces when their face all crunched up and they're learning how to do the bunny loop ears, loop, swoop, and pull? It's a lot of energy up front expending to create that new neural pathway in their brain. And they're trying over and over, and it takes work and consistency. And what's happening is that new neural pathway is strengthening, and you see this blue part? It's called the myelin sheath. It's starting to thicken. Every time they try and practice tying their new shoes, it thickens and thickens, and the electrical impulse in the brain to body, to their little fingers, it gets stronger and faster, kind of like the copper insulation and wiring, allowing electrical current to move faster, until one day what happens? Non-conscious and automatic. When's the last time you had to think about how to tie your shoes? That's neuroplasticity in action. It takes work up front. It takes consistency It's not linear. You'll have days where you are backwards and moving back, but as long as you're consistent, one day it will become part of your fabric and who you are. No matter who you are, you can, no matter what change you're trying to make. Now, I will say this one thing. I've done very blessed to work with some of the best brains in behavior change research. And just recently finished a project with BJ Fogg. Have you ever heard of him? Tiny Habits, Atomic Habits guy. Great book. And his recommendation is choose an action. If you want to create a change in your life, choose an action that's too small to fail. And that's what we're going to do in the action planning session, the breakout. Don't say you want to eat better. What are you going to say? I want to add one vegetable to my plate each day. I'm going to add an extra glass of water at 3 o'clock every day. Let's say you want to reduce your stress. I'm going to set an alarm at 2 p.m. every day to stop and breathe and say a prayer. Too small to fail, right? So instead of saying, I want to reduce my stress, getting narrow, too small to fail. So that would be my recommendation on applying this scientific concept to a change you want to make in your life. So, last kind of question I have for you to close it out and open it up to comment and question, but I'm actually going to push this back on you. What is one small way you can better oscillate in your day to maximize your energy and impact the trajectory of your life? We just threw out a couple examples, and thinking about these pathways and thinking about these beliefs and this stress response, I want to throw it back to you. And what I'd like to happen is that you start shamelessly stealing from each other on these examples of ways that you can oscillate better in your day. So let me ask the question, what are some ways that you can think of? And think of those pathways. Yeah. Yoga. Too small to fail, though. One yoga class a week. Once a week. I'm going to change the timer on my watch for 90 minutes. Stress. Wouldn't recommend that. Get up and stretch. That's a great idea. Setting a timer. Siri is our friend in that sense. Yeah.
How do we make it smaller so that you're not multitasking?
I love it. Okay, so how would you do that?
Me personally, I have 2 screens in front of me. Just one window at a time.
One window at a time. Okay, and what he should do in between task switching is a moment of recovery, a deep breath, a stretch, anything. My husband gives me a very hard time because I have 20 windows open on my computer at all times. And he's like, how do you function? But I've got a lot of different projects floating. And the only way that I get through without killing anyone during the day is oscillating between the focus. Now, I also don't check email as much as I can. I don't check it, and I check it in certain blocks during the day. Turn off all notifications on my phone. That way I can focus on one thing at a time, better manage. Fun fact, your brain is at its best cognitively in the morning. There's an amazing flushing system that happens during sleep. If you've never heard of it, Google TED Talk Sleep Dishwasher. It is the best TED Talk. You'll find it that way. It's one way to get a better night's sleep or something like that. Anyway, all the harmful waste proteins and toxins that build up during our day, they flush out during deep sleep. Another reason to get a better night's sleep. And your prefrontal cortex and neocortex are firing on all cylinders in the morning if you do that. Much more creative, intellectual. So any complex issues you need to work through, I would do it in the morning. That's also, by the way, a lack of that process in the body, a lack of adequate deep sleep has been related to dementia and Alzheimer's. Very closely related. Any other hacks? Oscillation techniques? Go for a walk. Too small to fail. One walk a day. Yeah.
So on the Apple Watch, you know it has that breathe
Yeah.
thing. So instead of snoozing it, you actually do it.
I set a timer on my watch or my phone, 3 p.m. and 3:02. Get up and move. No, seriously, get up and move. It says that. Because I swipe right. Woo! I don't have time for you. And then it comes up again. Yeah. How about meditation? You ever tried it? It will change your life. And don't think of it as this frou-frou, Buddha in the mountains for an hour Zen. No, it's a focused, intentional breathing. Pair it with prayer time. Pair it with devotion. And yoga. Changes everything. Guided meditations. Insight Timer is a great app. Calm and Headspace, great apps.
We're told to meditate on scripture in the Psalms.
So many places, yeah. And all it is trying to bring your focus to the present. Insight Timer. It's got good guided meditations. That's what I like about it. There's a good podcast called Meditative Story. It's 30 minutes if you had the time. I use it when I walk the dogs. It's a little bit of meditation, a little bit of storytelling. It's nice, calm. Can you think of any others? How about connection with others? Phone a friend, text a loved one once a day. How about gratitude? The most underrepresented health and performance tool there might be. What if you expressed a little bit of gratitude to somebody? It will actually changes your brain. We have a negative bias in our brain. We tend to look for the negative, survival instinct. It will change and reroute your brain so that you're looking for the positive all the time to practice regular gratitude.
And it also helps the people that you tell them.
Can't imagine who it touches, right?
Talk to a friend.
Talk to a friend once a day.
I guess that's therapy like, talking half an hour on the phone.
Yeah, there's a little therapy session. Call your mama, Any others? Access joy. How do you get specific with that?
Thinking, really working from a brain perspective, knowing what gives me joy so I can tap into those moments, what it feels like.
And stay with it, right? One of the hardest things to do is stay with joy. We always feel some of us feel uncomfortable staying with joy because we're like, when's the next shoe going to drop?
But it will slow your heart down.
Yes, that's a great one. Well, listen, I want to wrap it up by just thanking you. This was really fun, and I'm glad to spend the morning with you. And in our breakout, we're going to be taking all this from insight to action. I have a little worksheet. We talk about life mission, and we talk about all that stuff, and then we get really narrow on making specific recommendations. And any questions you have in these pathways, we go over them. Sound good? All right, thank you so much.